I'm Russell Hodgins, the Senior Pastor of International Christian Center. It was the most amazing experience I ever had in my life. I had a great ministry. God was blessing the ministry. Upstate New York, small little town. I'd been there 12 years. In fact, it was the town I grew up in. And we actually had bought my old high school. And so we were worshiping in my old high school building. And God had built it to about 300 people. I went to a conference and I didn't need to hear from God, so to speak. I was on fire for God. The church was going great. And God just rocked my world. And it deposited a seed in my life about New York City, and someone talked about the need that was in New York City. And I mean, I'm a country kid, I had horses. If I wasn't a pastor, I'd be a cowboy. I did a rodeo, where you ride wild bucking horses. Mind you, I didn't ride them for long. They bucked me off. But I mean, somebody always said if you can ride in a rodeo, you can work with any board. But anyway, so my life was there, family there, church, and we just loved it. It was my home, and God just put this in my spirit, and He wouldn't let it go, and it was like a burning bush experience. God just spoke to my heart, and on the last day of the conference, God for those days was speaking to me about coming to New York City. I wasn't hearing voices, but God was just impressing on my heart. The last day, the preacher's done preaching. I go to the altar. I'm sobbing. Nobody else was even at the altar. And nobody knew what I was there for. My wife was just like wondering, what's God doing to my husband? And the amazing thing happened. Somebody came up to me. Nobody knew I was at the altar. Somebody laid hands on me and said, God, give him the faith he needs to take this step, and he needs to take. And then somebody else came up and laid hands on me. I'll never forget it. And they said, God's going to use you to raise up a great work in the midst of trouble.
Wow.
Wow. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I had no idea I was going to, in a few months from them, come to International Christian Center that had 100 members left in a building that seats 1,000, and that was $6 million in debt. And the building was in foreclosure, and trouble. You talk about trouble. And but I had no idea. But God used somebody to speak that word into me, that God's going to use you to raise up a great work in the midst of trouble. And I'm clueless of what He's talking about. And long story short, that was in May. And I got up off of the altar and I went to the superintendent that day. I said, brother, you're going to think I'm crazy, but God's calling me to New York City. And I remember he patted my face in kind of a fatherly fashion. And he said, you're not crazy, Russ, come see me. So I came there, he says, get a resume together. I didn't have a resume. And so I wrote something down that wouldn't impress anybody. And I brought it to him. And I said, I'm ready to go anywhere. Brooklyn, Bronx, Manhattan. He says, okay. And he says, there's a church in Queens. He says, I think it's a match. I came home that day and I says, honey, get packing. They're sending my resume to Queens. I know they're going to want me. They never called. So I'm thinking, well, God's called me to New York, maybe, but I don't know when. And 3 months later, August 8th, the phone rang, and the superintendent was on the phone. He says, Russ, are you sitting down? I said, yes, I am. He says, there's a church in Staten Island. I said, where's that? I haven't even heard of Staten Island. I didn't even know it was part of New York City, I lived so far back in the country, man, they had to pump sunshine to us. And he says, there's a church in Staten Island. It's going to be like a new church planning. It just came under the district supervision, and I have the power to appoint a pastor. But he said there's $6 million in debt, and the building's in foreclosure. And with other debts, they probably owe $7 million. And the first thing you're going to have to do is get another building because you're going to lose that one. Do you want to go? I says, is there any chance they'll keep that building? First I says, how many people does it seat? He said 1,000 people, but it's in foreclosure and the interest is accruing at $1,000 a day. He says, I says, is there any chance we'll keep it, that building? He said, slim to none. But I found out God can do a lot with slim to none. And we're here today. And but that's how so anyway, that was August. Long story short, we moved here in October of 1998, and it has been the most amazing ride of my life in these last 10 years. Did my family want to come? I'll be honest, nobody wanted to come. My wife didn't want to come, and at one point I told them no. Maybe not now, maybe not there. But without taking the time, God gave us some miraculous signs. And so my wife didn't want to go, so I was telling everybody, when we loaded the U-Haul, I tied her up and threw her in the back. And so it wasn't that bad, but she supported me. It was hard. Anytime God makes a major shift in your life, it's never easy. Whatever God calls us to do is never easy, but it's always right. I remember coming over the Goethals Bridge, one hand on the U-Haul wheel, and one hand out the window, praying, God, give us the city. You know, I probably could give you a long explanation, but I've got to say the favor of the Lord. I got to say the favor of God. What happened? I look back, it's been 10 years, and what happened? I really believe that no matter where you're at, what country you're in, what part of the state or the city, wherever you're at, I believe that if you have a message that's anointed from God and it's relevant. People don't want to hear boring sermons, you know. I believe if you have a relevant message from God, and if you have anointed, powerful worship where people can experience God, where they can experience God's presence, and there's a loving atmosphere where, you know, people don't have their nose in the air, and where people just love each other, and we love each other at face value, white, black, Latino, Asian, no importa. That's Spanish. It doesn't matter. Okay. Yeah. It doesn't matter. If there's a relevant anointed message, if there's worship where people feel God's presence, if there's love among the body of believers, that will build the church, whether you're in Shanghai, New York City, or upstate in a small town. And we just watched God. Somebody asked me when I left this small town upstate, what's your plan? I'm thinking, what's my plan? I don't have a plan. I said, okay, I'm going to preach Jesus and love people.